many people that have known me, I've lived in the Vegas Valley almost my entire life, and now I live a new lifestyle here in Denver, Colorado. I've moved here since November, but I've always respected my roots, love my roots. But if there's anything I've learned about my hometown is we're very unfiltered. We never really hold back when it comes to a lot of our responses. We're just built that way. So if people that understand the Vegas kind of the vibe there, you kind of understand it, and we're very strong. That's why we're battle born for a reason. But lately in the NHL offseason, there's been some question marks. We've been trying to find some clarity. Last time I talked about it, I had Tony Cordasco up onto the show, and now I have another one of the hosts here at Locked On VGK. Chris Gawlik is going to be joining us. We're going to be talking a lot about VGK. Yeah, Chris, you know it. I mean, people don't hold back when it comes to a lot of these responses, and then not to mention, too, just how they really feel deep down about, some of these moves. But what I tried to get at, because look, I love my hometown, but I just feel like I've been bashed by my hometown more than once. And again, I love it. It's what it is. But I just think what I was trying to kind of come across when it came to the offseason for the Golden Knights, there's some question marks that are there. There's some expectations hoping that the VGK, they are a competitive group, no doubt about it. But the cup championship is now Florida. So you're going into next year now with the expectations. We got to be better than what the result that we got from last season in that first round exit. So, I mean, to kind of see this off season, what was your initial thoughts walking in before we really kind of dig deep into a lot of these off-season moves that happened recently?
You mentioned unfiltered, and now you got a former Chicagoland guy on your show who's now in Vegas. So, I mean, you'll certainly get plenty of that. The direction, I think I'll start with what my co-host Tony has been saying a lot on Locked On VGK. And you wonder what the backup plan was, and if the Golden Knights had a backup plan in case Marchessault moved on, in case Stamkos decided not to sign in Vegas. And the backup plan is now in the form of Alexander Holtz and Victor Olofsson and a third goalie in Akira Schmid from the New Jersey Devils. So that's not exactly the warming off season that we were looking forward to here in Vegas. And in Vegas, it's a little different as far as the way the Golden Knights do get players, whether it's free agency or trades or a combination thereof. And for lack of a better term, they did nothing.
Yeah. No, this was definitely the question mark off season that, seeing the VGK, because initially watching them through the season and the acquisitions that they ended up giving, I knew Mantha was just a rental piece. He was not going to be part of the long-term plan, but getting, Tomas Hertl and then getting Noah Hannafin, and you extend Hannafin on a long-term deal, which again, you got a guy that's at the very least still in his prime, a guy that could really kind of form into this defense, but it's going to take a lot of that because sometimes the chemistry might change. So here's my thing, and I know a lot of people really gave me crap on the Marchessault thing, but here's how I looked at it. You have a guy that was looking for a permanent home. I mean, bouncing around from Tampa to Florida and then finding his way to Vegas. For 7 years, I mean, you poured out blood, sweat, and tears. You've been through a lot of these waves, up and down, to where they missed the playoffs once in their franchise history. Then you go and you exceed expectations, win the cup. My big thing is that I'm a guy that's all about continuity and chemistry, because I do think in a team sport, that's important. And so you got to have the right guys that really do gel along with this group. I feel like with Marchessault gone, you're going to see a little bit of that change. Now, you still have Eichel, you still have Stone, you still have a lot of these core guys that are there. But I just think as far as like the misfit energy, it might be a little bit different than what we've been used to seeing in the last 7 years. So to kind of have some clarity from your perspective, My thought is Marchessault gone. There's going to be a little bit of that change in that locker room. And my thought when I said is when it came to expectations and what fans really hope for, my thing is you were a first round exit and Florida just won the cup. You won it a year ago. You got to be hungry by that next season. You got to really do you get back into the conference championship? Do you make some serious noise to exceed those expectations? That's where I was kind of getting at from there. What's your honest perspective, and can you provide some clarity, at least for our audiences, with the Marchessault situation?
I don't know. There's a lot of stories out there as to what the offers were on the table. On one side, you have the Marchessault camp where it seemed like something was possibly close. Then Kelly McCrimmon comes out and says Marchessault's team basically changed the term down the stretch as to how long he wanted to stay. On the Marchessault side, a lot of the things that you said, Marchessault wanted to sign his final NHL contract in Las Vegas, a 5-year deal. If he signed for 5.5 in Nashville, I don't think he would have batted an eye, if you will, at taking $5 million AAV to stay here in Vegas. And going a little bit deeper than that, like for 3 years, the Golden Knights will have a Stanley Cup window, maybe a 4th year, but for the next 3 years from right now, the Golden Knights Stanley Cup window is open. After that, it's got to close. Just you look at the other expiring contracts and the age of the other players. So you sign Marchessault to a 5-year deal at $5 million AAV.
Yep.
The salary cap is going up $4 million in the 25-26 season. So now we're going to be pushing $92 million. By the end of that contract, assuming Marchessault stayed in Vegas for 5 more years, the salary cap is pushing $100 million. $5 million for a player in his 4th and 5th year of his contract who is probably going to still be a 40 to 45 point scorer. It's a drop in the bucket. And when the team is struggling in that 4th and 5th year of his contract, you still got that misfit helping to sell tickets.
Right. Yeah, no, and that's true. And usually you got to have a balance of both of those because in the end, and I get it from a lot of those from the business's standpoint, because in the end, you got to have the fan bases that's strong enough that they're going to come to T-Mobile Arena. They're going to buy merchandise. They're going to, buy concessions, and they're going to be there in the game so that it, increases ticket sales. It brings back in the salary. And then that's when the salary really gets stronger from there, especially with, the new salary cap year, every single year that comes in. And so, I felt like they probably could have, for as smart as the organization has been, from the ownership all the way to the GM, they could have probably have finagled something. But again, sometimes, this is, to my defense, this is the second time. And what I've said to people is look, their business is business, however you handle it.
Second time, or you go back to Fleury? What are you talking about?
Yeah, from the Fleury time. Because in the end, it's like you have a class act type player who's well respected in the league. I felt like that was a terrible PR stunt, and I felt like they could have done better from there. But then you come into the Marchessault situation where, again, if two sides could not meet in the middle, that's understandable in any business. Then you go test the market. But the fact of you hear from Marchessault that they didn't try hard enough to really kind of keep them. It's like, who do we really kind of hold at fault? I'm not saying that this team will not be competitive. They have a huge track record of success. But I just think if you're leaving little crumbs behind of stuff like that, sometimes that can possibly come back to knock up on your door at some point down the road, right?
Fleury situation, I think it sucked, yes, but I think Golden Knights fans were able to get over that a little bit quicker than the Marchessault situation.
Yeah.
Because at the time you had Robin Lehner, who was a much different version of, the version that he is now, not playing in the National Hockey League. Lehner was a very, very good goalie down the stretch when Vegas acquired him. And then for that season where him and Marc-Andre Fleury chopped up the starts, I believe, during the shortened season, if I'm not mistaken there. And then after that, obviously, the trade happens, and so be it. You had a backup plan. You had Robin Lehner. Now with Marchessault, you don't have a backup plan. You have Brendan Brisson, Pavel Dorofeev, Alex Holtz, and Olofsson.
Yeah.
Which of those 4 players are going to actually do something and fill Marchessault's shoes? You're not going to fill Marchessault's shoes, number one, from a scoring output, unless one of those guys gets really hot. Maybe that happens, and great. That'd be awesome if that happened. You're not going to fill those shoes in the locker room. And then you mentioned the history now. You go back to the Fleury situation. It didn't look great on paper the way it happened. You even go farther back. Fan favorite Nate Schmidt sent packing because, Pietrangelo comes to town. And then you look at the Riley Smith situation recently. I'm sure we'll talk about Trevor Connolly in a little bit, but these are all things that are now getting, and Logan Thompson, that's another thing. There's a lot more meets the eye to that whole situation. But there's so many things that are happening. Now you do wonder, are free agents thinking twice about Vegas? Are GMs thinking twice about taking the call from Kelly McCrimmon when there's a trade on the table? And is it a major thing? Let's not go that far. Is it different now than it was 2 and 3 years ago? Absolutely.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you know what? You said it best. And see, that was the point I was trying to get across, was something like that. Because again, people are gonna heckle. It is what it is, but it's just like, but that was initially the perspective I was coming across when it came to that. And that's where I know that, like, when it comes to businesses like that, you want to give the best impression to not only just people that are within Vegas, but the people that are outside looking in. That is like, hey, I love the group, I love the chemistry, and I like what they're doing right now. They are in a winning mode type, which is what I want to be a part of. So there's a lot of those that you can really kind of put into perspective. But yeah, I think this offseason, clearly this team got gutted. But again, only one player that I could consider was a stinger. The rest of them, I felt like Alec Martinez, go get the last contract that you need to. You know what I mean? So, because he's eventually going to retire. I think he's done his job. He's already won 3 Stanley Cups. So he's going to get one last contract elsewhere, and then he's going to probably retire. I felt happy for Will Carrier to get the contract he did because of just what he's put in. So all these guys, and I feel like, you know what? If Seattle wants to put in that much money for Chandler Stevenson, good luck. In any realistic world, nobody's going to give you that. But again, if Seattle, that's how they look at it. By all means, you chase the bag, go get it. But
wish they would have traded him. They probably would have got a couple first-round picks the way they valued him.
Yeah. So I just feel like with just the state that the VGK is in, you still have a lot of strong pieces that are there, that some of them are coming back from injury. Some of them are hoping, hey, I need to have a better season than what I was given last season. And then potential trade talks. So one in particular, I feel like this whole thing, and in my perspective, I feel like there is something that is behind, like, that's in Kelly McCrimmon's back pocket. I don't know what it may be, but we know there's probably something there that's kind of brewing. But I feel like a lot of this is potentially to maybe make a trade move somewhere where they're going to get a big piece. And your thought on this, because the last thing I've heard is Mitch Marner. In my perspective, if you add a guy like that, that is really going to change a locker room pretty quickly.
It would certainly be a great deflector as far as the Jonathan Marchessault situation is. The Vegas PR team has been pretty busy over the last 10, 11 days now trying to get past all of this, and they've done a good job to a degree, I guess. Mitch Marner, yeah, that would be pretty cool. 100 points. A lot of people like to crap on him, say he doesn't do anything in the playoffs. He's got 50 points, I believe, in 57 career playoff games, so he seems like he's all right. Him and Jack Eichel on a line together, that could be a lot of fun. I don't know if McCrimmon has enough assets to send the other direction. Logan Thompson was rumored to be a big part of a possible Mitch Marner deal. Well, now Logan is obviously going to Washington, and Toronto has, in their mind, at least addressed their goalie needs with extending Wall and getting Stolovs, the backup from Florida. So they did that piece of the deal. Will the Maple Leafs ship a Mitch Marner for a pair of second or third round draft picks and a Shea Theodore or a Zach Whitecloud or a combination thereof, or maybe take a Brennan Brisson, one of the teams top prospects. I don't know if that's enough going the Toronto direction. Maybe a player like Trevor Zegras. I don't love that situation, but again, you're talking a player with a lot of flair, not a great two-way player, might not fit maybe in what McCrimmon does. Maybe a Martin Necas is still out there on the block from Carolina. I mean, these are just some of the possibilities, but honestly, I think the Golden Knights going into the season, I think they're going to stand pat. I think you never know with McCrimmon, and they're going to see what opportunities present themselves. If come January, the team is in a playoff position and looking to, make a run for the division, then obviously a long run when the playoffs start, then yeah, we'll see. We'll see if someone goes to LTIR again, number one, all jokes aside. There will be opportunities via the trade deadline to improve the team.
Yeah, and like I said, it's funny you mentioned with the LTIR, and it's like in 16 other teams that seem to be utilizing this very well. You got to get with the program. It's 2024, but I was pretty happy with just the way that the free agent market really was. I mean, day one was hefty, and altogether,
A lot of people got a lot of
$1.3
money.
billion in free agency. I mean, whoa. And then all of a sudden, Barry Trotz ain't kidding around in Nashville. He's putting all of his chips in. You got Vancouver that I think is very much refueling. And then the same with Edmonton after they added Arvidsson and they added Jeff Skinner. So when you look at the state of the Pacific Division, Edmonton is revamping. Vancouver coming off of a second round, and adding some players into their pieces in depth. And then you've got, the Kings here and there, they kind of will be lingering around, but they're, Seattle is hoping that they bounce back. They got a new coach, they got a new system. So when you look at the Pacific Division, I could probably say now there are about those three teams that could give the Golden Knights fits, while the rest of them are kind of more into rebuilding, retooling mode. How do you kind of see right now with, the way the state of the Pacific Division is right now?
Well, don't forget the Golden Knights struggled with the Anaheim Ducks last season, including the last game of the regular season. That whether the Golden Knights really showed up for that game or not, it's very debatable. Maybe it's not that debatable, but in any event, the Ducks were not an easy out for the Golden Knights. The San Jose Sharks, all of a sudden, they got some new blood, they got some energy, they got some excitement now. So these doormat teams, for lack of a better term, aren't going to be the doormats. So now you got to compete against those teams while you're still messing with Seattle, Edmonton. LA is going to be tough. All the teams that you said a few seconds ago, the Flames, they're in a weird spot right now, but they're making moves too. So the Pacific is tough, and a lot of people didn't really give a lot of respect to the Western Conference last couple of years, but the West has definitely come together nicely as the Pacific. Not this most recent, but the season before, there was 4 100-point teams. It's pretty good.
Oh, yeah. No, the Western Conference really, really stacked up very, very well. And the funny thing is, and a good friend of mine that, of course, is up and in my comments, who absolutely loves the Colorado Avalanche. And unfortunately for me, I'm in Avalanche country, but I still bleed VGK to the day I die, And so, but yeah, I mean, you look at even from teams all throughout, the Western Conference, the Dallas Stars. We know what their defensive identity with Pete DeBoer and what they've dealt with this past season. And I honestly thought, because this was my projection of them getting to the Cup, and unfortunately, they got cut short. And then in comes Edmonton, that was just on this magical run, and good for Connor McDavid, because thank God we got a chance to see him in the final. So, I just think with the competition, barring it, from the Western Conference to the Eastern Conference, I think the West, it's hyper-aggressive offense. I think you are also getting a real good mixture of some shutdown defense, but then I also do think there is a mixture of some very strategic coaching that's also involved up in there. So when you look at East versus the West, Eastern Conference, I mean, it used to be they had the coaches, they had kind of the system that was already kind of set in stone. So now you look at the West and it's like, damn, the offense is just absolutely breathtaking to me.
The days of the Eastern Conference, especially like the Montreal Canadiens, with that blue line trap, just stacking 5 people across the blue line and saying good luck, and and the tight checking and all that. It's opened up a little bit in the East. And the West, I definitely do agree with that. There's a little more flair, right? It's the West Coast, the beaches and all that, and Hollywood and stuff. So I think the players certainly adapt to that lifestyle. And you see a little bit of that on the ice. Of course, Trevor Zegras is who I'm referencing in all of this. And yeah, I mean, there's a little more of that ruthless aggression as far as the scoring goes in the West. And the East might still be, trying to pull off that trap in that old school type of hockey. But again, a Bruce Cassidy, he's very about that defensive structure, a goalie-friendly structure. We've heard that a lot. That limits rush opportunities and scoring chances from the other side. Obviously, he's an Eastern Conference coach, so that plays in a little bit too.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So these past 2 Stanley Cup finals that we got, both of which were first-time franchise winners with Florida and with the VGK. For 30 years, the U.S. soil has been absolutely unbelievable, and they've been picking out a lot of really good players over the years to where the U.S. now has been winning the Stanley Cup now for 30 years. And Canada now, I don't know what they're going to do with this. I mean, there are some teams that are lurking on in. I think many people are kind of putting their chips in up in Edmonton. You could make a wild card case up on Vancouver. Winnipeg disappointed the hell out of me after I just watched them give up 24 goals in a series. And so it's like, that's unacceptable. But when you look at back-to-back first-timers in the Stanley Cup, could we maybe potentially say there's an argument that maybe there is a team out there that has yet to win their first ever Stanley Cup after we just watched Florida and Vegas in the last 2 years win their first ones? Is there a team in mind with the way their system is put together, the way they've been aggressive in the offseason, and how they've been drafting and developing? Is there a team in the back of your mind that you're thinking could be the next first-timer in line?
Vancouver and Nashville immediately come to mind. Vancouver, I mean, they did all this with their third goalie, and now they've made some moves. Nashville, obviously, I mean, Barry Trotz is as aggressive as they come, and I don't think it's going to be the Sabres, though, in the East.
Yeah. No, I think the Sabres, but again, I could respect the fact I think they got a pretty damn good defensive line.
They'll trade it all, don't worry.
Or they got, oh yeah. I mean, that's
all gone.
But yeah, I mean, I think those teams, I think the same thing. I think Vancouver is up and in there. And then Nashville, they've been hanging on a thread for the last few years. They at least made it into the final. Now, granted, it didn't go their way, but they got a taste. They know what it means to win. Now they just have to put the right pieces in, put all their chips in, and eventually it becomes the highest reward from there. So I'd like your thought on this, because Edmonton and Connor McDavid, I am very happy for Connor McDavid, the fact that we got a chance to see him in the final and perform. Now, many people felt very mixed as far as should he or should he have not deserved the Conn Smythe. My takeaway is, first of all, he had an unbelievable playoff run. I mean, the guy, as hyper aggressive of an athlete that he is on all cylinders, the guy was clicking. And there's nobody that can match to the talent that he has. So people were thinking, well, you got to give the Conn Smythe to the winning team, one of their best team. But Sergei Bobrovsky got opened up in the last 3 games of the series. So I'm like, it kind of defeats the whole purpose. So because my dream, hopefully, that we get a chance to see is, I want to see Mike Trout in the World Series after I just saw Connor McDavid in the final, because I do think they're practically similar players to their own extent in different sports. So after watching Connor McDavid and winning the Conn Smythe respectfully because of the run he made, this now is kind of the fuel of the fire. This guy wants to get back in, and he wants to win any and all costs at this point, right?
I mean, listen, McDavid's the best player in the universe and might go down as the second or third best player in the history of the NHL. So it's important that he gets showcased. It's good for the game. Personally, I would love to see McDavid do well. I'm pretty highly invested in a lot of his hockey cards. So I was rooting pretty heavily from a financial interest during that run. But listen, McDavid needs a cup. Canada needs a cup. I know the States don't want to hear that, but it would be good for the game, especially if McDavid, anything that features McDavid in the grandest of hockey stages is important for the game right now.
Oh, yeah, no, 100%. And finally, before letting you go, Trevor Connolly. So the draft pick that the VGK ended up getting. And, my question is, how long does a lot of these draft picks really stay? It's usually like a 2-3 year plan until they become a trade bait. But Trevor Connolly, I think he's a very good piece. I think, if you get him in the right offensive mindset where he could build, he could start to really kind of get himself going when the time is right. I mean, how did you kind of evaluate this draft pick? Because in the end, they need some offensive firepower. They need the next guy up after Marchessault's gone. So, could he potentially be that piece that moves kind of the needle there for the VGK with their future?
Peyton Krebs is extremely important to the Golden Knights organization. Peyton Krebs suffered just a gruesome, I believe, Achilles injury right before the NHL draft when he came up. I think 2019, 2018, 2020, whenever that draft was. Winds up falling to the Golden Knights. He goes, falls outside of the top 5 or 6 where his original projection was because of the injury. VGK drafts him, develops him in the AHL. He gets a cup of coffee in the NHL. Peyton Krebs was the reason it took so long for the Golden Knights in Buffalo to get together on the Jack Eichel deal. Golden Knights did not want to give Peyton Krebs up. How does that factor with the Trevor Connolly situation? Connolly was a top 5, top 6 projection. There's a history there with some very inappropriate behaviors, and that forced him to drop. So the Golden Knights took a flyer there. Here's the issue. Allegedly, over 20 teams contacted the Vegas Golden Knights and said, hey, you draft this kid, we're not doing business with you. We're not going to trade for him. He is basically on our blacklist. Now, as time goes on, maybe that changes. But right now, the Golden Knights are married to Trevor Connolly. They're going to need to develop him. They're going to need to get him in the AHL and, the next 1.5 to 2.5 seasons and see what happens, because this is not the pick they're going to be able to trade away.
Yeah, no, it's going to be tough business through and through. But, again, sometimes, if you put a little bit of some pixie dust up on it and really wish upon magic, hopefully it might turn around for the better. But, in the end, you're kind of stuck with what you got, but you got to just make the best of it. So appreciate you coming on by, Chris. Absolutely love the perspective and appreciated you for the clarity that you gave us here upon the show. Where can people find you to get locked in on those Vegas Golden Knights?
You can find me at Locked On VGK. We're recording pretty much daily, even in the off season. I'm writing about the Golden Knights on for Inside the Rink, kind of sporadically in the off season, but I'm there. And then you can also catch me for the hockey news on their collectibles content sites, talking about Upper Deck hockey cards and memorabilia and collectibles and anything related to news in the hockey collectibles market.
All right, there you go. Collectibles and content, best of both worlds from there. I
might borrow that. CNC, I like that. I'll take it.
Hey, there you go. See? Got you a little something there. Chris, appreciate you bringing up on the time, man. Enjoy it, and be careful out on that 120-degree weather up out there, because I know what that's like. It's not fun.
I'm going to Alaska next week, bro. I'm on over it.
Come on down to the Rocky Mountains, man. It's cooler.